Every day I'm shuffling.
This episode of the CoinSpice podcast is brought to you by Cash Shuffle, because what you do with your money is your business. To give this new product a try for fungibility and privacy, head on over to electroncash.org, download their latest wallet 4.0.0, and give it a spin. CashShuffle.com for more information, because what you do with your money is your business.
What is really going on, crypto savages? You are listening to the CoinSpice podcast with host C. Edward Kelso, editor-in-chief at CoinSpice.io, your home for spicy crypto things on the net.
What is really going on, crypto savages? This is your host, C. Edward Kelso, editor-in-chief out at CoinSpice.io, back with another episode of the CoinSpice podcast, and this time around I've got CoinDesk analyst Peter Ryan. Peter's a fantastic voice in the space, a really interesting guy in the sense that he talks with numbers and charts and graphs. I do like CoinDesk. I'm a reader. I'm an avid reader. But a lot of the news I can kind of get elsewhere, and obviously they're a competitor, so we break stories, they break stories. It's a fantastic resource, but what keeps me going back to CoinDesk is their research, is their analytics, and how they chart things. And I really think Peter Ryan and the team over at CoinDesk doing different ways of charting, more holistic ways of looking at cryptocurrencies has really not only allowed me as an investor, as an enthusiast, as someone in the space to become more literate, but also more appreciative of kind of the different roles that different cryptos have in the space. It's not just, obviously, we at CoinSpice have a bias towards the currency aspect of things, but then there are other people who want, blockchain this and Web 3.0 that, and all the debates. Peter Ryan and CoinDesk have sort of ferreted out through the data a way to analyze value, and they go beyond the coin market caps of the world. They just kind of give you sort of flat. Now, obviously, CoinMarketCap is doing a little bit more, but they're just giving you sort of market capitalization. There's lots of debate about whether that's even valuable or relevant. And now, of course, with people questioning volume, whether it's even legit or not. But anyway, when you go to CoinDesk and you search out Peter Ryan's metrics and his charts, you find a completely different story. So I wanted to get him on to the podcast. Have him explain to you his methodologies and how he comes about some of these really cool metrics. He's been one of the leaders in the on-off ratio, for example, but also because he's executive producer for a new documentary. It's called Rizky Presents Blockchain. It's a 6-part series. It's going to be on Amazon Prime. It's produced from the people at CoinDesk and a few other partners. And it's a fantastic resource, really great way for new people to get involved, kind of understand crypto and blockchain and all that's going on, from mining to the currency side to law. It's unbelievable, and that is going to be released very, very soon. And probably by the time you listen to the podcast, it'll already be out there. So check the show notes. But he also explains kind of how that came together, who Rizky is, and why blockchain and why they're doing this now. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. You are going to learn a lot from Peter. So without any further ado, here is CoinDesk analyst Peter Ryan.
This is a long time coming. I am a fan. I of course enjoy CoinDesk. It is arguably the leader in the space for cryptocurrency news. And your metrics and the kind of how you chart things it's certainly what has kept me with CoinDesk. Before I get into all of that, first off, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm a big CoinSpice fan. I'm a listener of the podcast, so it's great to be on.
Too kind. Very cool. So before we get into your work, and you've got a documentary coming out, all sorts of exciting things happening in the world that is Peter Ryan. Give us, our listeners, in case they're unfamiliar, a little bit about your background, like how you got into crypto and all that good stuff.
Sure. So for all those listeners out there, I'm a research analyst with CoinDesk, but well, that's my current position. I found crypto back in 2013, 2014, right in that area when I was just a dumb college kid that was looking for the next big thing to chart my course. And I was in the libertarian circles. I was big on Milton Friedman, then going to Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, all this stuff. And I was playing around in all those groups, talking to a lot of folks, and I happened to be in my college libertarian club. And I was starting to come to the conclusion that, you know, all this political action trying to get libertarians in office wasn't really the most effective path forward, and really found the emerging tech scenes and, you know, disruptive energy coming out of companies like in Silicon Valley or wherever else as the, you know, the real solution that meets a lot of the end goals of libertarianism. And then it just so happened that somebody came in one day to that libertarian club and said, "Hey, we're taking interns at this thing called the Bitcoin Center." And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't know too much. I've heard, like everybody around that time, that to a certain degree, you know, you hear about Bitcoin and you kind of turn away and then you come back to it. But it seemed like a great opportunity of people wanting to kind of merge those two disciplines of that tech energy and the libertarianism. And so I went down that rabbit hole. I got over to the Bitcoin Center, which was located down in the financial district of New York City. It was like a stone throw away from the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
You know, all the big bankers, all the people that you know people would have a problem with in terms of how they're conducting themselves with monetary policy and benefiting from it. So got down there and got introduced to, you know, my first real like 101 lecture the first day on what is Bitcoin, what is crypto, you know, what is the future of this. And since that moment, I've been hooked, and I was really excited, trying to figure out ways that I could help out. And then, yeah, I was definitely was never the same after that. And then as I emerged from college, I tried to, you know, find my way in the professional realm. I then I explored tech, I explored venture capital, and then made my way back over to cryptocurrency independently, and then joining about a year and a half ago with CoinDesk to lead a lot of their efforts in developing their research capabilities, their data analysis, and some cool products.
Yeah, and CoinDesk is a juggernaut, man. Like it is. You know, I mean, you've got your Cointelegraphs, you have your Bitcoin.com news, you have your CoinDesk. There's maybe a handful of others that sort of compete, but I think when you, not you in particular, but when the average enthusiast goes to look for news, crypto-wise, and I dare say, like mainstream institutional, I'm talking governors, I'm talking, you know, financial bigwigs. I think they definitely go to CoinDesk. So that was a great move on your part, and you've only added to their offerings here. So you sort of slide in under the metric side, as we kind of alluded to in the beginning here, as a research analyst, and you've come up with some pretty interesting ways to kind of follow the space. And one of them is this. It's hard to describe in a verbal sense, but I've never seen anything like it. It's kind of like a radar chart that almost looks like a spider web.
Yeah. There's a lot of different names people have come up with it. You know, it's spider web is actually the first one time I've heard someone use that one. But yeah, it's a cool way. We call it the Crypto Economics Explorer. It's a 5-sided radar chart where We look at price, we look at network activity, we look at exchange activity, social activity, and developer activity. And we use those 5 broad categories to basically map out how all these different cryptocurrencies compare to one another in those 5 distinct areas. And each of those categories have underlying submetrics that are being calculated in terms of, let's say, what is network activity? Network activity is on-chain transaction volume, transaction count, and a few other metrics. When you look at exchange activity, that's, exchange volume, but that's also, how many trade pairs does a given coin have on exchanges. And so we really try to find, what are ways that we just don't look at maybe 1 or 2 or high level metrics. And a lot of the impetus was sort of thinking about, well, market cap is obviously flawed in a lot of circumstances. And so, while not throwing the baby out with the bathwater totally with market cap, but how do we really add to the whole picture and give people exposure to, okay, maybe a coin isn't that high in price, but, does it have underlying things in the developer category that shows, there's a lot of work being done there, or there are underlying metrics showing there's a really engaged and strong social community that's associated with it.
I'm watching a lot of people gravitate away from the coin market caps, the CMCs of the world, as more reports come out about volume and it being kind of not a phony metric, but I'm not sure how to phrase it objectively, but something less than valuable. And more people are starting to turn to this holistic approach, this kind of broader look at coins and projects, the personalities behind them, beyond price. And there was a cliche for a while until the market took a gigantic crap. Well, price is the least interesting part of a cryptocurrency. Well, we learned the hard way that maybe that's not true. But on the other side of that, having metrics like yours, your charts, I mean, you must be in seventh heaven as someone who's actually interested in the subject beyond just a salon or an academic side. I mean, you do get some real insight into these projects, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I think we all know is that, these cryptocurrencies are not the same, but after really building this product out and exploring all these different metrics and how they relate to one another, a big takeaway is that some of these metrics might not need to be the same for each of them. So let's just look at, let's say, EOS versus Bitcoin.
Right.
Bitcoin BTC has been going down this route of their store value. We don't want people to actually use this in commerce for goods and services that much at this time period. And so naturally, if that is the use case, if that's the swirl of discussion that's going on, you'd probably see a downtick, or at least a stagnation in transaction counts or engagement in other ways. Now, when you look at EOS, and that's a relatively new blockchain that came on board, they don't have transaction fees. And so then you start looking at that as, well, even if you have a small fee, having no fees is going to be an obvious incentive to start just doing lots and lots of transactions. And so lo and behold, we actually look at the numbers and we see over time, EOS has just taken off in terms of doing more and more transaction counts above BTC. And that actually might not be an indicator that one is better than the other, but just that, that is serving a different use case, similar to...
They're both cryptos, loosely speaking, are cryptocurrencies, and even that gets into some hot water. But they're loosely lumped together as cryptocurrencies. They're thrown on CMC, and we watch the price, basically as, with rare exception, as BTC goes, Bitcoin Core goes, so does the rest of the market. So, intuitively, we begin to think, well, they're all the same thing, doing the same thing, maybe slight variations on a theme. But as you pointed out, they're very, very different.
Exactly. And so that's the grain of salt we need to think about when we're looking at these cryptocurrencies, and not just saying, oh, well, we put everything in one final score, one final number, and that's the end all be all. And if, your cryptocurrency is below, that of another, you're obviously, dare I say it, a shitcoin. But I think that's really the wrong way to look at it. And that's why also we took the emphasis on not creating one final score that all these calculate into. I think that would be going too far. And there's been other people out there that, let's say, have tried to do something like that. And I won't call out specific players, but
I got you.
I think there's obvious problems that can arise with that sort of thing.
And I think just to belabor it a tad more, I think it really is 20th century thinking. It comes out of the old school financial idea of, say, bond ratings, which are worthless. I mean, they're completely ridiculous. These grades and these other fanciful ways in which they've tried to suss out value beyond the price, and tried to narrow it down into one thing, an A or a triple A or whatever the metric of the day is. They just don't tell enough of the story. And so I like that CoinDesk has separated out and really brought in what I would again consider or characterize as kind of 21st century thinking, where, okay, let's look at it now. Let's try to remove as much of our bias as possible from and let the numbers dance. Kind of let the numbers tell us the story, rather than as much as humanly possible, divorcing ourselves from oh, that's an A and that's a B and that's a whatever. I mean, it does take a bit of thinking. What has been the reaction to the CoinDesk push to kind of do more in terms of metrics?
Yeah, well, I'll say this: the reaction from the community, especially when we first released it back in November, I'll say that there definitely was a reaction, and I think, let alone whether that was positive or negative, the fact that it was causing discussion, I valued that. I thought that was
you shook
that
people.
in and of itself.
You shook them up.
Yes, and we got people talking about this, and a lot of people saw this way of measuring and putting cryptocurrencies in comparison and contrasting positions to one another for the first time that day we launched, where I and the rest of the team that were working on this, have been formulating this and looking into the research of how to do this for quite a while. And so people then were discovering, like, oh, well, there's certain ways that you can't exactly, add, your preferential metric to boost your coin over another, because then that creates all sorts of bias or just inaccurate results. So, like, for example, while hash rate is an obvious thing that's important and that sheds a lot of light on the activity going on with a particular cryptocurrency, if you're in the business of trying to compare multiple cryptocurrencies, what happens when you get to cryptocurrencies that don't really rely on proof of work, that really, start to move towards the proof of stake model,
right,
or, develop ASIC resistance and all this type of stuff. And so then you start to realize, well, again, you're not telling the full story if let's say you're just using hash rate or you're using miner revenue per day to formulate sort of an index, an aggregate value, because you're missing out that there's coins that not only have these different use cases, but again, they have different underlying ways that they incentivize security, incentivize the throughput through the chain.
And this is sort of just to get, because I know we have a mutual love of Austrian school of economics. This is kind of the Mangerian sort of look applied, ironically enough, to charts and metrics, which the Austrian school is notoriously not fond of. But this idea that, I don't want to say chain agnosticism, but there's something to that idea, right? That you have to kind of look at all these projects and go, well, I may not personally find value in this. Is not what I am interested in, but maybe someone else does, and maybe they need to know more about what their project or the project they favor is doing. So like 1,000 flowers blooming type of idea, right?
Exactly. And, information is our friend. More sunlight is the best disinfectant. All of the cliches under the book. This is what I think is helpful regardless of any ideological concerns. I just think bringing this information, which is objective, we can go to the sources, everyone can monitor it, recreate the same numbers on their own, and come to these conclusions. And thinking of like an Austrian perspective on it too, it's this is a private entity putting out ways to measure and aggregate value, which measuring in aggregate obviously has problems from that view. But as long as we are the private entity taking the risk and going to the marketplace and competing in the realm of competition for objective metrics on measuring blockchains, I think that squares the circle, so that we are providing value. We aren't just being silly Paul Krugmans running around with our fancy statistical models that are embedded with tons of assumptions that don't accurately model the world.
And for my money, I really, I'm not going to name the competition, but for my money, I really don't think anybody can touch you guys right now. So when I go and I look at charts or whatever else, and I want to get a better sense of a project, I just, maybe it's because I know your work so well, but I just sort of default to the CoinDesk site. So in any case, I think that's a great lead into what I'm super excited about, and at least half of the reason why I wanted you on is that you are now taking your egg-headedness, your number crunching, your bean counterness, and you're moving it into the real world. You're becoming not only someone who describes the site, but now you're I'm gonna try that again. You're becoming someone who not only describes the space, you're also now you're documenting it, and you're coming up with a documentary, a 6-parter. Well, first off, can you kind of describe what the project is?
Sure. So I'm the executive producer of Rizky Presents Blockchain, and we are releasing a 6-episode documentary series on Amazon Prime April 1st. And the series is about an international hip-hop dance artist who is Risky Rockmont, our host, and he dives deep into the world of blockchain technology to see how it's revolutionizing finance, cybersecurity, democracy, and more. And it really looks to introduce maybe some more normal people that want some explanation of, what is this technology? Who are some people in the space that are working on projects that can break things down? But also not just for the uneducated, but for the hardcore as well, that might know a little bit of these topics already. It's maybe a chance for them to hear from a different perspective or other voices of the interview subjects that we have in the space that are really working on cool projects.
Yeah, I was, because I'm a media mogul, I was sent the early clips and drafts of the documentary, and I was thinking, oh man, here we go, another friggin' Eric Voorhees vehicle or something. And I love him, by the way. But we over retreaded ideas of, we've seen a million times. It's not that. Right away, you're kind of smacked in the head with Rizky. He's a different cat, right? So he's this dude that just kind of explodes onto the screen, and as you say, you kind of walked right over that part. And I wanted to stop you, but it was like, he's not just he's actually a data analysis. he works in DC to kind of explain to politicians what's going on, but he's at night he's a hip hop dancer, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly why we thought he was the perfect host for a series like this, because he is bridging two worlds in his personal life. Being a data visualizer that is, breaking down things into easily digestible ways for people on Capitol Hill to like better understand complex subjects. But then at night he's going off and, he's this expert like break dancer, and, he's has this creative side, but also this technical side. And, besides from that, he was just also very hip on all these ideas of, crypto libertarianism. He comes from a background of George Mason University. So, they're very affiliated with free market economics and,
Right.
and how Bitcoin and crypto all fit into that, Mercatus Center, all that type of stuff. So we thought that he was just such of a great intersection as a personality with all these different vectors going through, that he was a very good voice to lead the interviews, to bring people in. And also that, he's not someone that is well known in the space currently.
Exactly,
So maybe he's a better companion for the viewer as they go through the series and they meet some of those other people that are a little bit more well known in the space.
And that's harder than people think to do. Risky's job, in the sense that he's naturally charismatic and he's affable, and you definitely want to talk to the guy, but it's harder to do, to be for the intended audience, sort of the newer comer to blockchain and crypto. It's harder to bridge, to kind of be that liaison, because most of us, we're 10 years on now, and all this stuff is kind of assumed. And so Risky, who obviously knows that just as well as I do, he is a very nice spoil. He asks all the right questions. He kind of follows the interviewee where they want to go. And then all of a sudden the video, or the little vignettes, again, there's 6 different parts here, will cut off or edit into him kind of standing by these moving graphics, and he tries to sort of even break these biteable chunks even further down. And so it definitely is it for sure grabbed my attention right away. And you cover, I think you cover the entire space, but can you kind of give some of the subjects, that sort of the macro subjects that you're focusing on in those 6?
Hey, Crypto Savages, this is C. Edward Kelso, breaking in with a quick and very shameless plug. CoinSpice.io is a feisty pirate ship. We depend to rely on almost entirely organic growth, which means our audience really does the marketing for us, and there's nothing more powerful than word of mouth. If you read an article you like on CoinSpice.io, if you listen to a podcast and you enjoy the content, or if you're just pissed, please promote us on social media, wherever you're at, wherever that is, whether it's Reddit, whether it's YouTube, Telegram, you name it, Twitter. Like us, retweet, all that great stuff. You can always find detailed show notes for every podcast on the corresponding page at coinspice.io. There you'll find links to our respective podcasts, your favorite platform like iTunes. Please give us a rating. Please give us a subscribe. All that good stuff. It helps the pirate ship remain afloat. It keeps us going. We appreciate it. As always, you can contact me personally if you have questions, concerns, you want to hear from a particular guest, you have a news tip, at Kelso, K-E-L-S as in Sam O, at coinspice.io. Thanks again for listening. We sure do appreciate it. And back to the episode.
Sure. So this was a process of, constant brainstorming to figure out, well, what is the best way to capture everything that someone needs to download to their brain to effectively get into crypto from the start. And, obviously there's the blockchain 101 areas we need to go over. But, once you get past that, what else is there?
Very cool getting into a mining facility, by the way. That was very, very cool.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That was like our kid in the candy shop moment where, everything worked out. The company that we picked, and that's actually episode 1, we went to Hyperblock, which is one of the largest crypto mining farms, in, if not the world, definitely in the Northern Americas. And we checked it out. We went to Montana, snowy, mountains.
Did you actually go? You actually went?
I myself didn't go because I'm a responsible producer and dedicated that budget to the film crew.
Sure.
But vicariously, I felt like I was there from every Snapchat that I received.
Oh, but the point is, Risky goes there and he kicks the tires, right? I mean, he actually goes physically to Montana and walks around. Miners just get no love, right? They're almost like devs in the sense that they kind of sit behind the scenes and we just kind of allude to them in passing. We always just kind of talk, oh yeah, and there's miners, we can But here, this is a great part of the documentary, and one of the reasons, many, that it's really valuable, is that he actually physically goes inside one of these compounds.
Exactly, and he walks in, and he even says, it feels like I'm inside of a computer right now, and that's the experience that I think we want to get across, especially to the newcomer, that this is the physical reality that is Bitcoin, because so much of it is just, where is it? It's this magic internet meme money. It's,
exactly.
It's not never tangible. And then you walk into a place that's like just, bustling with computer chips and, electricity flowing through it. And it's just huge. And it's, these tall shelves and everything. And you really get this sense of like, wow, this is actually the tangible reality of Bitcoin. This is what is going on here. This is something you can touch, you can feel, and you get that visceral feeling.
And the remainder from what I remember now is the other 5 episodes are somewhat New York City centric, which makes a lot of sense. We started talking about your experience with the Bitcoin Center. New York City is arguably the financial capital of the world. And so as it goes, you could make a lot of arguments that so goes crypto. And so let's see, what was episode 2 focused on? The second one? So we get into mining.
Yeah. So it's really mining and some Bitcoin 101 that goes on in episode 1. Then we move on to these other subjects that are a little bit more branching out. And so then we talk about, blockchain as the internet. And we sit down with the head guys over at Blockstack who are, trying to make a decentralized internet.
And that, just to interrupt you, which I have a really horrible habit of doing with all my guests, I really like that because at first it's kind of just an intellectual discussion, and then Risky actually breaks out his phone and actually gets an account, right?
Yeah, and we kind of walk through a demo of how you would use one of their applications, and in particular they're talking about how you create these decentralized identities that can traverse this blockchain internet regardless of any centralized server, where we have all these variety of identities that are in the internet. And how great would it be if we could just have something that we own that is decentralized to the individual, and the individual can walk around keeping their identity and all the data associated with it, and merely create permissions to go to the application layer to actually utilize that. And so that's what they're walking through in that demo, and they're trying to hit home of getting to the point where, yeah, Bitcoin is money, crypto is money. That's the killer app. That was the first breakthrough that we really did back in the early years. But as we kept going, other use cases started to pop up, and what they're doing over there is definitely something that is going beyond money and seeing other value to be created.
Yeah, it was fascinating because I've intellectually, read about it and so on. I've never actually seen it in the flesh, and someone sitting down to do this. That was very, very helpful. So you go on from there to the remaining 4 episodes. You touch on the legal side of sort of the ramifications for blockchain and crypto. And is that episode 3?
Yeah, so that is episode 5, actually.
5.
But yeah, we don't have to go in order. We can, we're doing our own thing here. We can be a little wild. Yeah, so episode 5, we sit down with Republic's legal expert, Max Rich. And, Republic is a startup in the space that is trying to bring, a security crowd investment platform, to the industry so that, people are complying with the existing laws on the books, some of which in the more recent time period have been a little bit more accommodating to this crowd investment so that people that are not accredited investors can jump in. And so they're really trying to be the first ones to get in there as the facilitator of people getting in on these token raises and doing it by the book. So and that's what we explore with Max Rich. He kind of discusses what they're doing and how they're trying to comply and showing how there's certain things going on in regulation that, obviously we can say are bad, but there's ways that we have to work with the system and we have to be practical, and we basically need to kind of color in the lines for now and just make sure that we give enough nurturing sunlight, waters for this industry to grow without having the regulators come in all uneducated and stamp us out.
Yeah, and it's when you go into it, you think this is decidedly unsexy in terms of the conversation, and no one obviously wants to hear from a legal analyst, but it actually turns into a pretty great conversation. And I know sort of the broader debate on legalisms and trying to square that circle, but I think the value there is, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, Max Rich, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Max goes and he actually lays out the history of the technology. And I learned a couple of things by listening to him that I didn't realize, that a lot of what we think is sort of brand new about this idea and using loosely this idea of the distributed ledger tech, goes back to like the 1980s. I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, and to summarize all of the content that he was bringing up, he was trying to convey that, while this is novel and new in a lot of ways, from a legal perspective, it's like, a lot of this has been seen before. There have been, new ways of doing things that have complied with existing regulatory frameworks. And so he talked about how, cryptography was going on back then. And, it was really surrounding just data and,
right.
What are the ramifications of data? And only then became, apparent once money and transactions were occurring with this, data meets cryptography meets securitization. And that is best exemplified through, the DAO, where the SEC couldn't really do anything in terms of successful enforcement. Yeah, but they used it as an educational lesson to kind of tell the rest of the crypto industry, this doesn't really pass the mustard. And, there's a thing called the Howey test, and there's some key points here. And if you fail the Howey test, then it's like, you're a security and you can't kind of cloak yourself in the realm of ignorance or, miscategorization. And one of the other examples he brought up that I thought was pretty funny was he said, like, looks like orange trees, don't comply with not being investment contracts. It's like they are. And because there was a case where people were buying orange trees back in the day, and even though it's like, oh, it's a tree, what does it matter? They were getting an investment contract implicitly that, you know, the farm would water and nurture and like grow the trees, and they would get, you know, benefit back out from that in the future.
And an expectation of return.
Exactly. And so that's where it starts getting illustrated way more that, you know, you don't need to explicitly have everything in writing, and, you know, everything is defined, you know, according to the rules. Like, you can be vague, you can be murky, you can be in a gray area. And as long as, you know, when someone takes a fine-tooth comb to go through it and they realize that it is an investment contract, that it is a security, you know, that is, you know, that is the situation of the crypto industry, and that everyone is starting to come to. And that's probably why, too, there's a big drop off in sort of ICO raising, and people have been moving towards, you know, the security token offering, the STO, because they want to comply more. And, you know, that's just the way it is. And, you know, and that says nothing to the idea of, you know, there's two ways to look at it. It's like, one, you know, what is a utility token? What is a security token? And, you know, being honest with the objective reality of that. And number two, you know, some of us, myself, think that, hey, we shouldn't have such onerous security laws so that we have all this, you know, overburdening regulation and red tape on entrepreneurs and investors, especially those earning under the thresholds in income and net worth, to be an accredited investor, to get in private companies.
It's amazing to me how often that point is skipped over in all these debates, and how people rush to condemn ICOs or STOs or IEOs or whatever we're now talking about, these investment opportunities in cryptocurrencies, the idea of speculating on them, and it's this dirty word, it's a kind of financial pornography, and everybody wants to down them. They skip over this idea that this prohibitive do-goodery that came out of, whether it was the Great Depression or, you know, whatever the latest historical reframing of it is, to save us from ourselves, is that this perhaps unintended consequence, if I'm being generous, really pushed out the smaller investors, so that accredited guy or gal now has to be worth something like $1 million, has to, you know, have all this credit. And if you want to talk about, you know, these cliches, these bromides of the rich getting richer and the poor, well, that comes from your progressive legislation. I mean, what you're doing is you're pushing on one side of this balloon, and you're blowing up this other side. So people will run to something like an ICO or these which I don't poo-poo at all. I think the vast majority are scams, but there still are. That doesn't mean there's not value there. And I think people are rushing to them, and we forget the impetus, or at least a strong push is like, as you described it, kind of odious or onerous regulatory barriers to entry, these hurdles that prevent competition from your standard initial public offerings. Or, you know, you can't get in, so you don't have the cash, and the only way that maybe you as a person, besides maybe owning a house, if the government pumps up that bubble enough, as a regular person, that you can get in on making money through having money, is now an ICO, and you've been blocked out of traditional finance. So that was a fantastic, and you guys hit on that a couple of times actually, which was I think a brilliant take. But anyway, I'm talking too much. Let's get to the because I want to leave for people, because there's at least 3 other episodes, and I kind of want to leave it to their imagination, because they definitely are going to watch it. But my favorite of the 6 is the last one. And this is where you guys bring in the philosopher du jour, Chris DeRose of Bitcoin Unlimited. I'm trying to think of it. Is it
Uncensored?
Uncensored. I've got Bitcoin
which is
Unlimited.
Which is a perfect way to bring the philosophy all together.
It really is. He's quite a character. Why did you guys pick him?
Yeah, so we were thinking a lot about, you know, the technical use cases, or the practicality for a lot of the episodes. And then, there was a real hunger that we started feeling in creating the show around, there needs to be some time set aside for discussing, what are the ethics? What is the impetus? What are the goals that we're all trying to achieve that are outside of just sort of the immediate or individual, company, mandates and stuff like that. So we thought, hey, people need to get acquainted with the philosophy here, and they need to get acquainted with, what are the foundational myths and motivations that are powering not only a lot of the big people in the space, but a lot of the people that are entering and that are waiting in the wings and being quiet on the outside. So we thought blockchain as philosophy was like a great way to end the season. We brought in Krista Rose, who's the show host of Bitcoin Uncensored. It's a podcast that has been around for 5 years, and he's had the position of being a journalist, a commentator, pseudo-Socrates, as he likes to be known in Twitter. And he's been always at the forefront of, looking at, are things scams? How do we define this industry? Why should we invest in this? What is the truth underlying a lot of the talking points? And, interviewing people at length to kind of discover that and really get past the first, 10 minutes of bullshit so that he can get to the end result with actual meaning. And so we thought, he would be a really great personality and voice to come in and articulate, what has gone on in this industry? Who are the original crypto advocates that came into this, and for what reasons? And, how has that changed? And who are some of the newer people? And, what does this all mean going forward? So we thought he was a great person to articulate that.
He really is, and I think he was a fantastic choice. If you're a fan of DeRose or not a fan, this is Chris completely at his best. He is laser focused. He gives you a nice background, and Risky's there to kind of facilitate that conversation. And then this hunk, dare I say, eye candy, enters in, named Peter Ryan. I'm slightly biased here. You actually come in and chop it up with Chris. And what was that like?
Yeah, well, you're actually referring to my stunt double. So kudos to that guy. But so yeah, I make a cameo myself at the end. I come in and I wanted to join the conversation that Chris was having with Risky and provide a little bit of perspective that, what have I seen, especially with looking at a lot of this demographic and sentiment surveying that I've done of the industry for the past year and a half. And just also from my observations personally, being around these different circles and seeing it evolve. And I wanted to touch upon the ways people are, coming into blockchain now. There's the original libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, early adopters of Bitcoin. And then slowly over time, we kind of saw this introduction of people that really maybe don't care so much about that. Maybe they're friendly to those ideas in a way that a neoliberal is, but they're not exactly, they're not repulsed by the state. They're not exactly, chanting "end the Fed," all the time.
Right.
And so they really represent sort of a more milquetoast form of the original libertarian. And then even when we looked at, going past that, you had, the introduction of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But then once we saw Ethereum really pop up, then you started to see an entire new doorway that people came through, and that did not replicate the same types of demographics of Bitcoin, which was that, Ethereum enabled smart contracts, a little bit more programming, application developers, people from Silicon Valley. Yep. Those molds started to come in, and they weren't motivated exactly by the same things as, the Bitcoin people. And so you started to see, there were certain affiliations being formed with Ethereum and, larger established institutions, whether they be big banks or, government organizations, the UN, you name it, Davos, things that were just, you would never have thought back in the early days that would be the case. And so you have this swirling mass of different, interest groups in the crypto industry now, and they know each other are different, but I think that we really haven't gotten to the point where we've addressed that to a large degree. We've addressed the fact that there's different tribes of coins, but I don't think we've addressed the fact that there's different, tribes of, ideologies that are here. And I think those will have to come into conflict at some point. And, it's going to be really interesting to see what side wins out.
Yeah, and it is fascinating stuff. That it's a perfect way to end your season with Risky and Node House, and the documentary I think it's going to kind of wipe away some libraries here, and it's going to be a go-to document, for lack of a better phrase, that people will refer to. It's a fantastic education. Even someone who's been knee deep in the space for a while now, I found it really, really interesting, provoking. It's nice. It's nicely paced. The direction is well thought out. The cinematography is good. I liked the sound, all of it. So I can't say enough great things about it. And so where can we find your work, and where can we find this documentary? Yeah, so a good place to keep tabs on everything I'm doing is just follow me on Twitter @_Peter Ryan. I do some pretty dank memes occasionally too, if you care about that type of stuff. And then if you want to watch this documentary, please go to Amazon Prime. Please find us, type in Risky Presents Blockchain. It's going to be under the name of CoinDesk, the account that it's associated with. Also keep tabs on YouTube and other social media. We'll be releasing clips from the season in case you want to just, get a quick 2-minute bite of what's going on. So yeah, there's gonna be a few different places to see glimpses of it, but definitely please go to Amazon Prime, launching April 1st. See the whole 6 episodes. It's 110 minutes. You can get the best distilled version of what crypto is, what are some cool people in the space doing, and some coherence to the philosophy that is powering this industry. It is a fantastic documentary. We'll have links to everything on the show notes here at CoinSpice, so you guys can find it easily and quickly. Peter, man, it's been a long time coming. I said I would keep you for half an hour, and I've kept you for almost an hour now. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for doing this. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And if I'm able to say it at the end right now, everybody stay spicy.